Warriors Unite! Back with another episode of Bigger Warriors 2 in the 1% Club. Hope you guys are doing well. Hope you guys are on your purpose. Hope you guys are continuing to conquest yourselves and conquest then everything around you through God's purposes. So welcome back, my friends. Hope you guys are doing well this evening. Wanted to kind of do one to catch up on a topic that we had in our backlog, and I wanted to kind of do a little bit of discussion about it. But first of all, I hope you guys enjoyed the live stream. We had 375 viewers. That's wonderful. Thank you guys so much. It seems like it was something that you guys like me to do again. And so we've had a lot of people view it afterwards. I think as a few people talked about that it just, technology-wise, I'm not very good at technology, but it seemed like it worked out well. And it seemed like it just kind of downloads by itself once it gets done. So it's all good. And we'll probably do another one. I'm going to try to do one once a month. Just to kind of get questions answered and things like that, from my opinion. I try to get all the questions answered. I think we did most of them. There's a couple at the end that I probably didn't get to, but we'll try to get to some of those and have more people kind of participate next time if we can as well. So thank you guys once again for all the comments, and I appreciate all that stuff, and that was wonderful. So, all right, so I didn't get a chance. I don't have my sheet with the shout outs, so I'm going to have to miss that for this one. But let's go ahead with our topic. And so we're at 1 minute and 30 seconds. So this was kind of asked to me about a few people, but we're going to focus on, we're going to talk about historical figures and retention, celibacy, brahmacharya, sophism, all these type of things that talk about self-control and getting away from self-abuse. I'm going to move my thing over a little bit so you can see me better. And away from self-abuse. And basically, there's a whole line of people. So let's take a step back first, warriors, and kind of look at the idea that we're talking about here. So any kind of logic would tell you that if you have the ability to be able to procreate as a human being or any kind of species, and you can look at any species to look at the same type of thing, that they are going to have that power within them to have children. And so, along with the female, they're going to have this child. And so it's half the male, it's half the female, but you provide the sperm for that child. And so the power in that sperm and that semen is very, very important. Now, think to yourself, if you're not just throwing it away all the time, what kind of benefits are you going to get? Now, we talk about it, but because there's so many people out there trying to disprove it or not take it seriously, or some kind of myth or wives' tale that semen retention is important, some people just discard it. They don't even bother looking at it, even though it's throughout history you could see so many people who've learned how to practice it. And you go back to, I heard somebody the other day talking about the fact that Napoleon Hill's book, Think and Grow Rich, he was some kind of cultist. And, when you look at people, they get into things, and we're going to talk about getting into different things, but let's talk about the fact that some of the ideas that they have some merit to them. And you should look at every single idea you have and talk about it and kind of look at the idea. And when you look at this idea, it makes sense, right? That if you hold your semen in, if you hold the nutrients in you have, you're bound to benefit yourself. Now, some people think that, and I heard this the other day, you're going to explode or something's going to happen if you don't let go of it. I mean, again, a lot of misinformation out there about how God works and the body works. Once again, it comes down to the idea that you have to trust your God. Your God made you a certain way. In my mind, your God is not going to go ahead and make you inferior type of human being. He's not going to do that. He's got a purpose for you. He wants you to succeed. He wants you to do things that are going to follow his purpose. So he's not going to give you a body that's malfunction. We end up doing a good job destroying our own bodies, because I think as time goes on, you can look at things and diseases and stresses, things. A lot of these, I think, in my mind, start with bad sexual behaviors for years. And you're losing all those nutrients. And of course, your body's going to be overcome by colds and illnesses and things like that, because your body is weakened. You're giving away all your life force. And if you look at history, a lot of people understood that. And we're going to talk about a bunch of different people here, but you look at the idea is that they all created inventions, music and art and inventions based on the fact that they did not release. They used all that energy, transmuted it to make things better in our society. And all we got to look at is all the things that have been developed in over time in areas like philosophy and art and music and engineering. And you can see that those people who developed things were ones who really kind of were dedicated to using their energy to succeed in goals. And so they learned how to transmute it. Now, it took me many, many years to figure this out. And it's only now that I'm seeing the benefits. And of course, we always talk about the fact that your benefits are going to be determined by how long you had problems, that you were in these, dealing with this issue. My case was 47 years. So it took me a good 3-4 years to now seeing the benefits of what's happening. And that's why you have to be patient with this process. But all you got to do is look at the history of people. So let's take, for example, Beethoven. You guys know Beethoven with music. And he made a comment. He says, let me preserve, and he talked about Semen, let me preserve it for loftier ends, for God and the exalted art of creation. So Beethoven understood. At the peak of his creativity, he knew that he could not afford to lose his energy. And that makes perfect sense logically. No matter what people are telling you out there that you can get, you're supposed to be more vitality and vigor and energy by releasing. Look at people. People become zombies. And you just know this by the fact that if you release, especially if you're having intercourse with somebody, you release, the female is all excited. They don't fall asleep. Mac, they're ready to go. They're for hours. The male falls asleep. That's because you've given your energy. All you got to do is look at all the species that this happens with. The males procreate, and a lot of times it leads to them being killed or losing their energy entirely. They're worthless, right? Now, there's theories out there to talk about the fact that, we shouldn't be procreating. That semen retention really is the idea that if you're going to procreate, you end up moving on a level of eventually passing away. And you can see that over a period of time, people abuse this to the level they're not going to live a long life. And a lot of these people in the 30s and 40s and 50s, they're sick or they're dying and it starts to me with the sexual energy. So Beethoven was one. Plato, we know Plato. He did a lot of temperance when it came to Greek athletes. And we know this from people like Mike Tyson, Muhammad Ali. All these athletes talk about the fact that they abstained from sex, especially boxers, who basically said, we can't do that. Dancers have told me this, that 2 years and 2 months they could not have sex with their wives because it would affect them in their performance. And you know that. So when you think about this logically, you have to think to yourself, okay, I have this superpower that can help, in part, create a child. Why would I use this for some basic, real short-term gratification? So you can see why we're in a matrix here, and we've been fooled. I've been fooled. I was fooled for many, many years. So I'm as guilty as anybody else. So I'm not putting any kind of judgment on anybody. But we're fooled. And I'm trying to, as a lot of people are out there, trying to give this information to kind of indicate that the Eastern world has been really much smarter than the Western world on this stuff. We've been kind of bamboozled into thinking that it's okay to go out and have sex and there's no consequences of all this stuff. Just enjoy yourself, have pleasure. In the meantime, you're destroying yourselves. And we're all destroying ourselves. And that's why we look around, and there's very few people who are vital out there and vigorous out there that I see on a daily basis. Most people are weak and fragile. And if you go back and probably examine a lot of these people's behaviors, it's because they started off with a lot of abuse of their sexual energy. And they're probably still doing it to some degree. Mahatma Gandhi. Now, he's at the pillar for actual, semen retention. He had 2 decades, and he talked about this in the book Incontinence since 1964. He had two months not 2 months, 2 years, I'm sorry, 2 decades of, bad behavior, right? And it took a long time. Now, if he wouldn't have had those 2 decades, who knows what he would have been able to do. But he became a pillar for self-control, for continence, and he led a nation, because he was able to draw more. And I personally believe, and I think that I saw this in the autobiography of Malcolm X and a lot of other people that I've studied over the years, that as you keep your semen in more, you're keeping all those vital nutrients you have. You're actually connecting more with your inner self. And I think God resides within each person. And as a result of that, you now make a stronger connection with your God. And so as you become, your streak becomes longer and longer, you become more God-like. Now, are you going to be like Jesus or Muhammad or something like that? Of course not. But you're going to become more God-like. You become more like a God. This is why women, they can't help but following you around, right? Men admire you. You have opportunities. You get so-called, like, quote, lucky. All these things happen because you're becoming more God-like. The longer you do this, because now you're keeping your stuff, energy inside of you, and now you're using it for your Creator's purposes instead of just your purposes. But the book on celibacy, he talked about celibacy as becoming a tremendous thing that he had to learn after 2 decades. Muhammad, he actually had problems with power, right? Another temptation. Jesus, obviously, in the desert for 40 days. But we talk about a quote that in Matthew 19:12. Are there enough eunuchs who have made themselves eunuchs for the kingdom of God's sake? Eunuchs, being able to control yourselves. Do we have enough people who are able to be leaders, controlling themselves? And I've heard this from women as well. Vigor Warrior's wife said this to Vigor Warrior one day. If women cannot respect someone who can't control a situation because they need security and they feel like they're secure in any kind of relationship, any situation. But if you can't control yourself, whether it's sexual, whether it's otherwise, and it starts with sexual, then it becomes other types of things. So any kind of temptation you can fall for a lot easier if you're, if you're not controlling that sexual behavior. But it starts with the sexual behavior because your eyes and those things look differently because you're looking at things from a different perspective. But if you can control that, then you can control everything else around you. And all these other behaviors become easier. You can take cold showers with no problems. You can have a diet. You don't have to overeat. You don't have to get worried about, getting, lazy. You're always going to be busy doing something. You can always go ahead and don't worry about drugs or alcohol or gambling. All these other types of addictions come along with losing your control. And now you become anxious, stressed out, and I think you're more vulnerable to diseases and things like that. So a lot of these things happen when you start off misusing your sexual behavior and your energy, and you're not using it to transmute into successful things like a lot of these people are. So Jesus, Muhammad, a lot of these people were super gods because they were able to retain for long periods of time. And I would guess, obviously I don't have a lot of information on this myself, but you go back and look at the religious texts, and a lot of that was, people knew that back then. And there was back then, even those days, no wonder these people were revered, because they were able to control themselves with all temptations in doing that. Buddha, teachings always talked about continence. Teachings always talked about controlling yourself, having that control within, focusing, giving attention to the power, your attention within. St. Paul, you talk about the Hebrews, always, talked about this. Islam, tremendous continence that people had, through different types of part of the year. Christianity, people like St. Paul, Immanuel Kant, Sir Isaac Newton. A lot of these people focused on, periods of time where they could create, where they could actually be successful and meditate and pray. It used to be the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, they would only appoint people that were celibate. Now, I'm not sure if that's still the case at this point in time, and with all the problems that Catholic Church has come into, there's a lot of question with that. But The idea was pure in its original state, that you should have people who are leading you, priest-wise, and pastors that are celibate, because that's a self-control. This is why when we talk about this issue, I think people are really, they're misled. They feel like there's no deal to have sex with somebody. There's no deal to give up your energy. Well, I thought the same thing, but I was fooled. I was misled. When you're looking at people, when you look at people who release all the time, who have no control of their sexual behavior, how in the world can you trust them to do anything else? So that's why you look for leaders who have that ability to control themselves. And that starts with celibacy. It starts with being able to control that sexual behaviors. And once again, back in the old days, Roman Catholic Church, they would appoint people that were celibate. Now, again, everything corrupts and power corrupts absolutely. Absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? Those, as Lord Acton used to say, that's the whole thing. That what happens is that people get corrupt as time goes on. And all of a sudden they can't control that behavior. Now we look at people who were like Isaac Newton. We look at people like Tesla. We look at people like, Beethoven again. All these people were people who were able to invent things. Now, why were they able to invent things? Well, they had the creativity. And again, I really believe that creativity comes from the fact that you're able to use that mind of yours. You're able to use the brain. When you're focusing on women, you're focusing on, this lust thing all the time, which, I had problems with myself. You're not thinking about other things. You're not thinking about being creative. But if you're looking at a woman, and I'm just addressing this to men right now. I mean, obviously it applies to women, as they look at men the same way. But the problem is deeper for men because they're very visually oriented. Women are not as visually oriented. Men are. And so when you're looking at women and you're looking at how beautiful a woman is, you've got to check that in your mind. You got to say to yourself, this woman is no better, no different than my sister, my mother, my daughter. Or their skin and bones. Or look at them any way you want to look at them. But don't look at them as being attractive. Look at them as being someone who is just a normal person. And if you do that, all of a sudden, you got the power to decide what you're going to do in that relationship. The woman's power, in this case, honestly, is your attractiveness for them. And the fact that you want to get them into bed. And that's the problem with this whole situation, right? When you're looking at women as objects, they not only have control over you, but you're lost. You're desperate. And because you're desperate, you're going to do things, you're going to get out of your mode. The last thing you're going to think about is your own goals and your own success. And when you look at all these people we talked about, and there's thousands more out there who achieve things, right? As Napoleon Hill talked about, transmuting that energy to other things. It makes perfect sense to realize that the person who is focused, the person who's working on goals, they're working on inventions, they're working on things in their life, they have no time to think about how a woman is in bed. That's the last thing they're concerned with. And in fact, I think in the pure state of things, no matter what religion you're talking about, in the pure state of things, sex is something that is not that important. Unless you're having procreation, I mean, intimacy with your wife, that's a whole different meaning. It doesn't necessarily mean you have sex. And even if you have sex, doesn't mean you're releasing. But the procreation, that's when you're giving something up to someone else for the purpose of having a child. And as I said, you look at all the species in the world, and our species is no different. The male is giving themselves up for reproduction. All right? And a lot of people will talk about that's really the reason for males anyway. And perhaps that could be a point. But you don't have to follow that and kill yourself in the long run. Because you're going to kill yourself. Little by little, you're draining yourself out. Especially if you're releasing all the time. Especially if you're going ahead and just having sex with anybody you see. With no kind of filters or anything like that. You're going to drain yourself dry. It's just a matter of time. No matter how much energy you've been blessed with from the Lord, you're going to drain yourself out. You're going to abuse it. And I've seen it over and over again. All you got to do is look down the street and look at people who are emaciated, part of that reason, and sick, walking. I mean, they're 40, 50 years old. And they basically look like they're 90 years old, ready to die. And a lot of that, in my mind now, I'm just telling you my opinion, starts, if you look back at the history of these people, you'll probably tell when it starts with poor, the ability to not control their sexual behavior, whether they're masturbating all the time, whether they're having sex all the time, it's the same thing. You're still releasing. And a lot of people come back and say, you know, and I remember talking to one person, had no understanding of the effect this has. We don't. No one teaches this. We taught the opposite. The more release, you're better, right? You got to release so many times a week, so many times a month to be healthy. Well, I don't know. All I could tell you that at this point, and I thought the same way, but I could tell you that I have not been healthier since I've started doing this, and I'm almost at 1,366 days or something like that. Now we're close. We're closing in on 1,400 days. We're talking about almost 3 years, around 3 years. I think it's 3 years, right? Something like that. I think back in before the pandemic. Yeah, I think it's about 3 years or so. And so maybe it's 4 years. I can't, maybe it's 4 years. I think it's actually 4 years or 3 times. Yeah, it's about 4 years now. We're talking about almost 4 years, right? So we're talking about 4 years. I have not felt better in these 4 years than I did all my whole life. And it goes back to my thinking that I should have really realized when I got this book in 1998, Kelder's book, A Fountain of Youth. I should have really paid attention to the reason why this all was going on. The 5 rights are wonderful, and it helped me a great deal, kind of move in the right direction. But until I did that 6th right, and that was transmuting that semen and not releasing, which wasn't really talked about directly in the book, but that was really what the reason is. That gave you the energy for everything else. So really, the fountain of youth is your semen. That's finally understood that. Once you understand that, you realize you can't give any of that up for no matter what. Unless you're going to have a child and you want to have children, that's the only permissible way to do it. So what you're doing then is you're trying to have, you still get enjoyment with the woman you want to be with and enjoyment, all that kind of stuff. You just are not going to release. And you can control yourself to do that. Years ago, if you look at stories in the Bible and religious texts and everything, people didn't release at all. In fact, it took them one time to have a child. Why do you think that happened? Well, they're not releasing. If they're releasing all the time, they're going to have trouble having children. If they're basically doing it within the scope of procreation all the time, they're going to have trouble doing that. Because they're doing it so often, it's not that powerful. But in a sense, if you're doing it once or twice, you've got a better chance because you're using all that nutrients, and God is pushing you to do this in the right way. So that's why we say that, temperance, as Plato's talking about to the Greek warriors, is crucial when it comes to this. And so as we talk about this, it's very important to understand that. So hopefully this gives you a little better idea of some of the historical figures that use SR. This is just an unbelievable power you have. And it's been shown throughout the history of the world. And there's so many different figures like this. We even talk about Tupac and everybody else that we've talked about in the past. But continue to look at this. Continue, guys, to start thinking about how powerful this is. Don't listen to what you're hearing out there. Use your brains and think about this a little bit. Use a critical thinking brains and realizing that what God has given you, you need to keep at all costs. And you'll find yourself in a whole different world thinking-wise. You're not living in this world. You're living in a spiritual world. And that's what the Lord has told us for all these years. We're not living. If you start believing and have a relationship with your Creator, I don't care what religion you're in, you're no longer of this world. You're living, yes, you're physically here, no doubt. You physically are affected by things around you, yes. But you're governed, and your actions and your behaviors are all spiritual. And there's lots of things you cannot see. And that's why it's important to get control yourself, so now you can start seeing those things that other people can't see. And a lot of times, one of the benefits of retention is to be able to have clarity of thought around you, to be able to see things that are not so visible to most people because they're not really connected to the energy force in God. So, all right. So anyway, my friends, I hope you enjoyed this one. In 25-minute one, this is a little bit longer. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Once again, thank you guys for a great live stream. I'm going to keep doing those. We'll try to do one in July. Keep moving forward. Maybe we'll do more of these in different ways. And we'll try to kind of keep and trying to improve little by little. Once again, if there's things that I can do to help you, if there's things we can do to kind of talk more about it, I'm happy to do it. My only goal at this point, and maybe one day I'll go for monetary type of things, but you know, we have about 5,000 subscribers, so I'm not really interested in doing all that. I'm interested in making the biggest impact I can to help people, because people have helped me along with this idea for years, and I find kind of understood it after all this time. It took me a long time, and you know, it just shows you no matter if you have a doctor or not, you know, you're not really that smart, right, until you kind of figure some of this kind of stuff out. So it took me 59 years to figure it out. Hopefully you guys figured out a lot easier and earlier before that. So, all right, my friends, and anyway, until next time, hope you guys have a great evening, and you guys continue to learn through things. One, every day is a new day to a wise man. And number two, guys, always remember to battle